Welcome to Awards Buzz. I'm Shadan Larki here with Jake Schreier, the director of two episodes of season two of Beef, an Emmy winner for the first season. Jake, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, Jake, so for the second season, you sort of book in the series. You direct the pilot and the finale. How did that come to be? And tell me about sort of coming in for that structure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I just want to direct as much of Beef as I can. I was in post on Thunderbolts, like when they were shooting, so we had sort of carved it out where I could come out and I think I was supposed to do like a week for the pilot, and then would come back at the end of the season, like after Thunderbolts came out to do the finale. But then the fires sort of disrupted everything, and our schedule got pushed. So I was kind of like hopping in and out here and there and doing scenes helter skelter. But I knew from talking to Sunny that the kind of the cycles of the show were such an important theme, that it was really important to us that there be a kind of strong voice and perspective in the beginning that was mirrored at the end. You know what I mean? And that like we weren't just sort of doing things in an opening episode that would not be echoed at the end. So like we tried to design it to really feel like there was a plan in place from the very beginning, that when you got to that final episode, it felt like, oh, this was all built towards a very specific goal. And we tried to kind of do very specific things within the shot structure to highlight that.
Can you tell me more about that? I mean, because the scope of season two is so much bigger. You've got a bigger cast, more locations. So, how did that reflect in the visual language? And yeah, how did you mirror the two episodes? That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, there's always this idea in Beef, obviously, like this season is a very different season and looks very different. And James Laxton and Grace and Olga brought this whole kind of different visual perspective to it in the look. But as far as the kind of way that we shoot it, like something Sunny and I have really landed on liking is this idea of kind of imbalanced coverage and character perspective through lensing, where like the camera is always closer to your perspective characters. And in season one, that's sort of maybe not easy to execute, but easy to understand who it should be. I mean, it's Amy and it's Danny and balanced when they're in scenes together. I think what's tricky here is that you've got four perspective characters, and they're often in scenes with each other. So there's a lot of discussion with Sunny about who to kind of weight each scene towards. But you see in that beginning, even as it's sort of dancing back and forth within the argument between characters, uh, that's the kind of thing that like those shots as they exit, obviously the opening shot is a mirror, the big long water where we're going to find Ashley and Austin within that. But even in the shots as they go to the car and throughout that argument, all of those shots are essentially the same, and like we want to make sure that whether you notice it or not, that you're feeling like a kind of visual language of return. And then obviously like we have the big samsara shot at the very end of it to kind of put the nail on the head of that idea. But there is a kind of rubric that we've designed for the show about perspective and the way those scenes are shot, so that even when the actors are free to go where they want, there is a kind of weight and balance to each scene, and it's the kind of thing that can be sort of then taken and applied to an ending so that it feels almost like you've seen it before.
And can you talk to me about sort of the characters, sort of there's a complete flip in sort of fate and sort of power dynamics. So how do you sort of, direct that both in terms of what you're telling your actors and then also like visually again to show sort of the shakeup in power structure, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you really have to clock, and it's great, because Sunny has such a design for the math of that as it moves through the story. I think that it was something like Kaylee and I would talk a lot about like how, Ashley is eventually going to become very adept at manipulating people, but the question is in the first episode, we see signs of that manipulation, but like, is she conscious of it? Or is it something that she does more naturally that she then begins to realize as a power that she has? And we wanted to leave room, I think, for all of these characters to have somewhere to go. And so there was a lot of kind of in that opening episode, sort of holding them back, and leaving room for them to evolve. And then knowing that we had this episode 8 where we could go to the furthest lengths of those things.
And I have to ask you about I mean, Oscar Isaac's character, first of all, he's brilliant, but also like, I mean, the reveals that we kind of learn in the last episode of sort of how far he's fallen and all that kind of, it's really heartbreaking. And you sort of spend the whole season kind of feeling for him and then disliking him. And then how did you sort of feel about kind of where he lands and again sort of directing that because it's such a tricky balance and then everything with Carrie Mulligan and sort of there's so many big reveals I guess and so how do you manage that both as sort of with your actors and with the structure of the episode?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is like have actors as great as Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan, and Kaylee and Charles and Song Kang-ho. I mean, my God, the talent level on the episodes was amazing. I think that like what I love about Sunny's writing is that it highlights these little moments where there's that shot in the opening episode where the two of them are kind of ships in the night, and it's written that way in the script of like both both Carrie and Oscar kind of look back at the wrong time and don't connect with each other. And this feeling that if these people could just kind of open up one little bit and just be a little bit more honest about themselves or a little more open, they might be able to get past these things. But for all of these little reasons and things that we hold on to, they feel slighted, and then that makes them close down. And the hope is that, over the journey of the season, you get to I think everyone comes at it differently and has characters that they empathize with more at certain times than others. So they look at like, how could I ever be aligned with that person? And by the end, the hope is, the whole job of filmmaking is this kind of empathy machine to hope that we can bring the audience to a point of connecting with all of these characters. And despite all of their many faults and all of the many things that they have done to each other throughout the season, they're complicated to be sure, but the joy of the writing is that it isn't cynical. That like it is there is a dark humor to it and there's darkness in it and sadness, but that it aims for something very, kind of open and honest and I think really beautiful. And so like when you have actors, like Carrie and Oscar who've been waiting to do that, this whole season to get to play a moment of that kind of, earnestness. And again, even in that moment, they're still lying to each other a little bit. But for a moment, maybe they're not lying to themselves, which characters often are in Beef, and you get to see that come out. I mean, it was just a really beautiful thing to watch on set.
You mentioned Thunderbolts. It makes so much sense that you directed Thunderbolts in hindsight, but because that's also similarly dealing with so many characters and interpersonal sort of connections and all these things. But how did doing that in between two seasons of Beef like shape you as a director? Because I think just that, I mean, your range as a director is incredible to be able to do all of these things. An
Uh,
underappreciated range, if I may say so.
well, I mean, it's funny. It's like I mean, mostly it made me very tired, but very grateful, and very spoiled when it comes to actors. Just to have Florence and I mean that entire cast of Thunderbolts was just so amazing. I think. Um, it's interesting because, Sonny wrote so much of Thunderbolts and then Joanna came in and it is the same group of people, that you're working with. And so a lot of the themes, cross over between the two. Maybe they're just like on a kind of, a broader scale in some ways on Thunderbolts and a little less internal. Well, but, I guess in Thunderbolts, when you go internal, you literally go into a full, magic realism internal space. And in Beef, you're reading that in their faces. But I think it doesn't feel that different to me, if that makes sense. Like you're still tracking characters and needing them to get them to places and hoping that people come to empathize with folks that you wouldn't otherwise empathize with. Like it doesn't feel like an entirely different job. It's just the kind of parameters around it maybe change a little.
And what did you leave Beef sort of feeling about people and sort of where we are? I think there was a part of me that kind of left feeling, I don't know, pessimistic. Um, I don't know, would you agree? Or how do you sort of, what do you take
I
away from?
I mean, I want to be careful. I mean, because obviously Sunny and I have had a lot of discussions about this, and I really admire what he was going for with the whole series and what he was going for in the ending. And it's something that we talked about a lot And it's a very, very subtle, delicate thing to get at that we were trying to go for, which is that there is a kind of I just I want to make sure not to like I want people to be able to take from it what they want to take from it, but at least in the way that I look at it, there is actually a hopefulness to it, and the hopefulness comes in acceptance, which is that yes, there are some of these things that either can't be fought or that we don't always live up to our youngest ideals, but that there's also kind of beauty in all of these cycles. Like I don't think that it's meant to be, we're it's not an inherently depressing ending, even if there is, it's not a full, not everyone gets a simple win either.
Mm. And what would you say, just as a director, like Beef has given you, particularly season two? I mean, like I said, it's such a there's so much in terms of scope and the visual language. I mean, how would you say that you've grown because of the challenge?
Yeah, I think, I mean, first off, what it gave me, I mean, on one simple level, anytime you get the opportunity to work with people that you care about on, work that challenges you, and that is hard to pull off with incredible collaborators. I mean, you're just lucky to do that. I think I also got to go to Korea and work with, people that whose work I've loved since I was, like a film student. And, that just felt incredibly special to be there and working on this. And also to get to see Sunny, part of what we connect about so much is that we have these films that we both love, from Korean cinema, and to see some of the work that he's emulating, and for him to get to work with Song Kang-ho and like see that actor say his words, in his voice, like was just a very special moment on set. I think for me, we're just lucky to get to do this. And again, to have work that like I don't think that it's not easy, and it's not clear that it would work. And, it wasn't at all clear that season one would work. And it was this really lovely kind of, collaboration that came together. I mean, Sonny was always very confident, and he'll make fun of me for this, but I think I admire always that he's taking risks and swings. And, it would have been easy in season two, I think, to figure out that, okay, that formula works and to try to repeat it in some way. And he didn't do that. He gave us all this really, really difficult challenge of like making it broader and more intricate and a little less easy to digest in some ways. And like, could we pull that off? Like, could we express something that feels, personal to him that ends up feeling personal to everyone involved because they brought themselves into that process? And I think, season two absolutely was that. And that feels like a really a thing to be grateful for.
Yeah, and I would say as an audience member, you sort of project your own, whatever it is you're going through onto the character. So mission accomplished there. Jake, as I let you go, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you just want to mention or leave our audience with, in terms of your directing or the show as a whole?
No, no, I don't know. I mean, I could talk about shot structure for 6 hours, but I won't bore you guys with that. That's fine. Yeah.
No, no. Well, is there, I don't know, a shot that stands out to you, from the finale, or just something where you're
Oh, I don't know.
like,
I
I can't
mean,
believe
obviously
I
the
pulled
Wonder
that
was,
off.
yeah, I mean, the Wonder was fun. Like this idea of like before we even knew where the finale was going, Sonny had this idea of like he wanted to do a kind of old boy Wonder in a Korean skin clinic with like skin being thrown around. And so working with Chris O'Hara and all the actors to, we like started in LA having to use cardboard boxes on the floor, and then had a warehouse in Korea where we'd send the actors to go rehearse every day because it's really them doing it. Uh, and to have Song Kang-ho there as part of it, like who's been part of so many of these films that we're emulating, like that just felt very special. And yeah, I've like done a bunch of wonders, but there was something about that one that felt, again, like how can you do something that succeeds in an action context, but also still feels like beef, which is never just one thing or just straight, that there's this kind of, they're not action heroes, but in their revulsion and their discombobulation, they can actually find their way out of this, insane madcap situation. So that was
Yeah.
a pretty fun one
I
to
have
do.
to say, in the finale too, sort of when we go back to the resort, but we don't know where all the characters have landed and who's still there, and so it's kind of like a mystery that you're watching unfold as the camera moves. It's just so well done.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, I mean that again, we talk about that mirroring. I mean, that was a place where we knew we were coming back to it, and so everyone had to kind of we had to do this quick swap out so that they were both at magic hour, but like all the extras swap, and there's a different version of the season, so it's like the old is new and the shot is almost, essentially the same. And there's a number of shots in that ending sequence where they are direct mirrors and parallels to episode one, just so that you really feel, whether you notice it or not, that sense of cycles in the show.
Well, it's really brilliantly done and a pleasure to get to talk to you about it. Thank you so much and best of luck. And we'll be back for Beef season three.
All right. Yeah, whenever he writes it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you bet. Thank
Take
you so much. I really
take care,
appreciate
Jake.
it.
I really
Thanks.
appreciate it.